Not a story you hear every day, and thankfully not. A Florida nurse is going to spend time in prison after her husband walked in on her having sex with her teenage stepson. But it was the boy's bravery in coming forward and telling the truth that is what helped police nail the now convicted sex offender. We're going to sit down with a Florida attorney to talk about a plea deal, the defendant's fate, and the disturbing details of how we got here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 35-year-old Alexis Von Yates, a nurse who at one time was working in Marion County, Florida, will now spend the next 2 years in prison, followed by a lengthy probation period after she sexually assaulted her 15-year-old stepson. In court this week, before Von Yates' sentencing, that teen's mother called Von Yates a coward and incestuous pedophile for abusing this boy while he stayed with his father in Ocala over the summer vacation in 2024. An affidavit that was filed in court in November contained what can only really be described as graphic and stomach-churning details, which the teen provided to investigators after eventually telling his mother what had happened after returning home to Washington, D.C. Now, to talk about this case, to talk about Von Yates' sentencing, I want to bring in a different Alexis, Florida trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg. It's not like we picked you because you have the same name, but you do have a specialization in covering these kinds of cases. You know, I don't know what the most shocking part of this case is. The fact that Von Yates apparently seduced her 15-year-old stepson, that her husband, his dad, walked in on them in the middle of the act, that he encouraged his son not to tell anyone what happened. What's your reaction?
I mean, the whole thing is disturbing that the stepmom would do this, and the fact that the father appears and is advising the son not to say anything. I mean, you would think that the first reaction of the father would be to immediately call the police as well as the child's mother and advise, both parties of what had just happened.
And it is kind of remarkable to be thinking about, and now that she's been sentenced, it's a very different kind of situation. And I'm going to get into her nursing license in a minute. But if you haven't been following the story, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the accusations that this teen had made. So he told investigators that his dad was working overnight as a lineman, and he was hanging out with Von Yates in the living room after his younger half-siblings had gone to bed. He says they stayed up late. They were playing video games, they were watching movies, they were even using Yates' marijuana vape pen, and police paperwork indicates that the teen told a forensic interviewer that Yates had been making sexual jokes in front of him for approximately a week leading up to that night. Now, Alexis, let's just stop right there. Some would say this is grooming. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it was grooming. I mean, she was very aggressive, and I don't know how much in detail we're going to get into exactly what she said to him, but it is public record, and it actually is even in part of the filings having to do with her nursing license. But we're going to assume there was more conversations similar to the ones that took place on the night of the incident, but it's extremely disturbing the things that she was saying to him.
And according to an arrest affidavit, he also disclosed that he hadn't had any sort of sexual experience before and was infatuated with Von Yates. Now, according to the arrest affidavit, quote, the suspect and child victim kissed. As the suspect began escalating, the suspect said, "Oh man, I wish you were 18 because you're not old enough." The teen told the interviewer that he performed oral sex on her, and this escalated with the two then having sex. He says when his father came in unexpectedly, found them on the couch, he ran to hide in another room. The teen claimed that his father told him to pack his things to go stay at his grandparents' home, and as he was packing, he claims he overheard Von Yates telling his father that she was sorry, and that this child victim looks like his father when he was younger. Now, Alexis, I think it's important to note in any case, particularly this one, we always wonder how can an allegation be credible if it's just based on purely someone's account. I've always said, are things just so unbelievable, so outrageous, so crazy that it has to be true? Like, how could someone make something like that up?
Well, I think in this situation, it's not just a he said, she said, because we have the situation, like you had mentioned, that the father walked in on them. And then it also sounds like there was some admissions that were going on that were also made. I mean, here's the bottom line. We have a grown person that is sexually assaulting a 15-year-old child. This is a child that we have. And there's been studies done that there is obviously some severe mental health concerns for this child when this type of thing happens to them. So I don't think that we had in this case that it's so absurd somebody maybe made it up situation, but it is concerning in many sexual assault cases.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked out of a meeting and just thought, wait, what did we just decide? Or maybe you sat through a great discussion, but you kind of lost track of the action items later. Look, I've been there. I'll admit it. But that is why I want to bring your attention to our partner, Plaude AI, and their newest product, the Note Pro. So Note Pro is an AI meeting assistant designed for leaders. It's about the size of a credit card. It's slim, it's portable, it's perfectly integrated with your phone. And I will tell you, I can use it in brainstorming sessions when we're planning new episodes of Sidebar or interviews, and it picks up voices from up to 16 feet away. It filters out background noise, and it can record nonstop for up to 50 hours. But here's the real game changer. It captures absolutely everything: audio, pictures, written notes, highlights, and then the app turns it all into a structured summary with insights, clear to-dos that you can share with your team. And with Ask Plaude, it's like having a second brain. It can draft follow-up emails. It can pull data reports. It can even help you brainstorm. And by the way, it's all based on the context of your meetings. Plus, Note Pro gives you some peace of mind because the display screen shows your recording status. It has Apple Find My, fast file transfer. It meets the highest privacy standards, so I feel secure using it even for the most sensitive of topics. And if you're like me and you want to make the most out of your time, it is time to try the Plaude Note Pro. So right now you can get 10% off of Plaude's other features, Note and Note Pin with code Jesse. Just click the link below or scan the QR code on screen. And it only gets worse because according to the teen, multiple family members discouraged him from talking to the police or telling his mom what happened. His aunt also allegedly told him that Von Yates had been saying that he manipulated her into having sex. Have you heard anything like that before, Alexis?
Well, first of all, under the law, that can't be because he's the minor, she's the adult. Yeah. There's no, it's black and white. There's no, if she had sexual intercourse with him, then it doesn't matter if he, quote unquote, enticed her. And you know, what's interesting here, I think what sticks out is if this would have been in the reverse, where you would have had a stepfather with a female stepchild, then we might not have been having this conversation. I think what's jumping out here is the fact that it's that kind of old thought that I thought our society had gotten past of, oh, he probably wanted it because he's this 15-year-old boy. And, you know, she was doing a favor, which is ridiculous. She sexually assaulted this child.
And the idea of trying to keep it quiet, you know, I don't want anybody getting in trouble, don't want family getting involved, don't want people knowing what's going on. This is like next level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I don't know if the husband's still with her or if he plans on, but based on his actions, that kind of sounds like that his intent, instead of writing away, going and filing for divorce. I don't know if that is the case here. I mean, there's no excuse. I would assume it would have come out if she had done, other than the joke, something else. But the question is, what other inappropriate things maybe had she done previously that have not come to light yet?
Yeah, so when police arrested her in November, according to the affidavit, it says, Yates advised she did not wish to speak with me without a lawyer present, but made several unprovoked statements about believing that since the Department of Children and Families had closed their case, she was in the clear, saying the incident was so accusatory, attempting to put blame on the child victim. So Von Yates was released on a $10,000 bond until September 16th when she received her sentence. And prosecutors had initially upgraded her charges to sexual battery by a person in familial authority, which is a first-degree felony, carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. But she opted to take a plea on a lesser charge of lewd and lascivious battery on a child between the ages of 12 and 16. And that plea deal came after the judge determined earlier this year that the victim's statement in the weeks and months after the assault, that would be allowed in a trial. Can kind of guess here, Alexis, right? She probably felt, I'm going to lose. Let me try to take the best deal I can.
Criminal cases cases do plea out, as we all know, a lot of times. So that's not unusual. What's unusual in this particular case is, first of all, we had a major downgrade of the charge. So we go from sexual battery, which she faced life imprisonment, all the way down to lewd and lascivious, which maximum is 15 years. So that's number one. The next thing is there's a scorecard when you are sentenced. And we had a major downgrade off of that scorecard. So what took place was the judge, which they're supposed to do is have a conversation, or the prosecution is supposed to have a conversation as well with the victims. How do you feel about this plea? And what happened was that the mother of this minor child was very concerned that this child was going to have to testify in an open court. Now, in Florida, a lot of people don't know this, that a minor would have to testify in open court. This case we're talking about here got quite a bit of media attention. It was, on social media as well. And the mother was severely concerned about the child having to testify in open court and relive what had happened to him. So the mother, as well as the child, they agreed to the plea. And that is why the judge, because the judge could have kicked this plea out. The judge could have said, no, this is going to trial. But that's why in this particular case, the judge agreed to accept this plea, which really 2 years for what she did really is very minimus.
I agree, because my understanding, like you said, is under state law, this victim would have, been required to testify and have to be cross-examined. I mean, even getting on the stand in general is really tough to do and can be very stressful. But to have to face cross-examination and questioning your account, and a lawyer potentially calling you a liar, making up the allegations. Look, people will say she should spend decades in prison. But in the interest, maybe you put the interest of justice to the side and you think about the overall effect here, and you think about the benefit to this victim of not having to go through that. It's tough to say if this is the right ending.
I mean, that's, in my opinion, it's the judgment of the victim. And that's why the prosecutor went and spoke to the mother and the victim about what do you want and what do you think is justice. I would believe that the mother and the victim would want her to spend much longer, but she's still going to prison. As well, as you mentioned before, she was a nurse. She's en route to permanently lose her license.
Let's talk about it. So first, before we even get to that, according to a local paper, Ocala News, in an order authorizing the plea deal, the judge wrote, most persons have never had to observe the adverse impact that testifying publicly can have on a child who is required to recount the most intimate and private details of their life in a jury trial. This court has had that opportunity, and that adverse impact cannot be overstated. That impact would have been undoubtedly amplified in the instant case where the substance of the victim's testimony would be made public in a profound, far-reaching, and permanent way. The order went on to say that Von Yates' plea spared the victim the exposure, embarrassment, and re-traumatization that would result from being compelled to recount some of the most intimate moments of his life so far. So what does this plea mean for her? Well, again, 2 years in state prison, probation for 10 years, 200 hours of community service with the Marion County Solid Waste Litter Control. She has to register as a sex offender, no contact with the victim during this entire sentence. Alexis, before we go further, her life after prison is no picnic. What do you see generally for people after they leave prison?
I mean, the big thing is that she's on that sex registry. Now, remember, that's public record. People do not want people on that record in their neighborhood. That she potentially is going to have trouble finding housing. She potentially is going to have trouble finding a job. So her life definitely is going to change substantially, and also going to prison. That's no walk in the park, but it's going to change substantially. Jesse, going back to that about the child testifying, many people don't understand that and why that has to be. And that's under the Sixth Amendment right for confrontation. So it's a constitutional right, but it really is re-traumatizing that child. It is a balance. Yeah. And a lot of prosecutors that prosecute these sexual type cases, it is something that they have to take into consideration, and because they have to relive it, like you said.
Now, since she spent a little bit of time in the Marion County Jail before she was released on bond, 2 days were marked down as time served. The court indicated that the victim and his mother were in 100% agreement with this plea deal. This is something we've talked about. But one other thing to think about here, Alexis, as far as we were able to see, she didn't have any prior criminal history. Is that strange to you? Like, is this a one-off? Is this part of a compulsion? Are other people haven't come forward? It has to start somewhere. But, at the same time, when you talk about someone who's committed a crime, sometimes they lead law-abiding lives, and then one day they commit murder. So it's not surprising. We've seen that. But does it surprise you here that you're not seeing anything else?
It doesn't surprise me. I think that why this is slightly different, and it shouldn't be, like I mentioned before, is you have the woman is the person perpetrating the sexual assault on a boy. And there's all of that background and perceptions that are attached to that. So it's very possible that she was doing inappropriate things with other minor boys, and they may not have said anything to anybody. I mean, if you think that this child would have listened to those adults that were saying, don't say anything, and didn't go to his mother, then she may have gotten away with this. I mean, that's the bottom line. So how many other times was she, during the course of her life, put in a position where she maybe didn't take it this far, but it came, close, and nobody said anything, and there were no ramifications.
That's a good point. Look, this case has had consequences beyond the court proceedings. The state of Florida suspended Von Yates' nursing license after her arrest in an order of emergency suspension of license. The state's Surgeon General wrote, Miss Yates' continued practice of nursing constitutes an immediate, serious danger to the health, safety, or welfare of the people of the state of Florida, and this summary procedure is fair under the circumstances to adequately protect the public. Alexis, what do you think about that?
So yeah, she should have, under the rules, she's supposed to what's called self-report. So when she was arrested, she should have self-reported this. So this goes on to support kind of just her MO. She's like thinking, oh, they're not going to find out. I don't know what she was thinking in her head, but she didn't self-report, and it forced them to do this emergency suspension. Now, it's only a suspension, so there's now a proceeding to permanently take away or revoke her license, which I think this is going to be a slam dunk there because now she's been convicted. So
in other words, you don't see a path by which once she's released from prison, she could ever get a nursing license back in Florida or another state?
She could reapply, but I do not see that they are going to approve based on these circumstances because there really is a basis to say she is a danger to the public. And that is kind of the threshold that they're going to look at. Is she a danger? There are circumstances where somebody could be convicted of a crime and they are able to keep their license. There's different avenues. They can put in restrictions. They can make sure they have oversight. There's other things that the licensing board can do. But in this circumstance, especially with this conviction at this point, no, I think they're going to revoke her license permanently. And even if she attempts to apply, I don't foresee her being able to get it back in any state. She would have to disclose to any other state that her license had, even at this point, been emergency suspended, and she would have to disclose that if it is permanently revoked, that happened. If she didn't do that, once they found that out, that would be a basis alone for not giving her back her license.
Uphill battle, to say the least. There's another consequence to what happened here, and maybe not surprising, but it's been reported that the victim's relationship with his family has been massively damaged. According to the New York Post, the boy's mother told the judge that Von Yates' actions ruined the teen's relationship with his father, claiming the two haven't spoken since this happened. And that's something, Alexis, we think about the ripple effects, the ramifications of something like this. We don't even know if Von Yates is talking in a relationship with the boy's father, but talk to me about the effect that this has now had.
I think the problem when you have sexual assault, like you had brought up, Jesse, that, a lot of times it's hard for people to fathom or believe that took place, or they don't want to, they're in denial. It does tend to sometimes separate families, unfortunately. I can't speak to the father's motivation. Obviously, you would hope that he would support and stand by his son for what happened to him. And hopefully moving forward, it's my understanding the boy is in therapy for this. Hopefully moving forward, they will be able to have a relationship, not for the father, father, but for this child's mental health. You know, we all hope that he gets there and this doesn't have permanent effects on his life, that this is a ripple, and with that therapy that he'll move forward and be able to be, you know, a happy, functioning adult.
What a case. Alexis Rosenberg, thank you so much for taking the time. It was good to see you.
Thank you for having me, as always, Jesse.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. See you next time.